his own father. It mentioned that he always responded to Ron and treated him like a person. Of course, Ron did not really think that way. That was why it was easy for Kale to talk to Ron. He just needed to answer Ron's questions and treat him like a human being. I hope you enjoy your breakfast. Thanks. Ron, make sure you eat a good meal too. Kale walked past Ron and into the dining room. He could see his family sitting there. His father and the current head of the Henitas household, Ruth. Next to him was Kale's stepmother, the Countess, as well as her son and daughter. The four people looked toward Kale. You are late again, today. Kale's gaze turned toward his father who spoke. The birth of a hero described Kale's feelings for his father like this. His father was the one person that Kale listened to. The reason the trash did not leave the area and got everything he wanted inside the Count's territory was because of his father, Count Ruth Henitas. But, unfortunately, Kale's father was unlike the other strong fathers in this novel. He did not have any special skills or influence. He just had a lot of money. However, Kale liked this a lot. It was the perfect family environment to live a simple life. Then there were the other three individuals. His stepmother who knew that he did not like her and avoided him. Her smart firstborn who found it difficult to deal with his much older brother Kale. And the cute youngest of the family who avoided her older brother Kale, but it wasn't like Kale bothered them or they bothered Kale. They just treated each other like strangers. Kale thought this was such a great environment to quietly live alone. Take a seat. Yes, father. Kale looked at the feast on the table that did not meet his definition of breakfast and sat down on his seat. He then felt something was odd and lifted his head up. Is there something you need to say, father? No, I do not. Ruth was staring at Kale. The rest of the family was doing the same. Kale made eye contact with each of these family members. They all quickly turned away whenever he made eye contact and continued to eat. I guess they find me really difficult to handle. Kale turned his head toward the table as well. This luxurious feast that was different than the breakfast he used to eat just to fill his belly made him start to smile. He first started by cutting the sausage in half with the knife. It is so juicy. He didn't know if juice flowed out as soon as he cut into it because it was handmade or because it was cooked well, but the color on the sausage made him hungry. Kale started to smile without realizing it. Clang. He heard something fall down and made eye contact with his younger brother Basin. He could see that Basin had dropped the fork in his hand. My apologies. Basin calmly apologized like the personality described for him in the novel. The servant in charge of the meal quickly came over to hand Basin a new fork and picked up the fork on the floor. Watching that made Kale think that it was nice to be a noble. Before he focused once again on the food in front of him, Kale had found the first good thing about coming into the novel. This breakfast was extremely luxurious and so tasty that his stomach was completely happy. The smile on his face could not disappear. How? That was why he did not hear his brother Basin's shocked proclamation. Kale looked around at all of the dishes in front of him. He then moved his fork towards a salad made of fruits that he did not recognize. After filling his stomach with meat, soup, and bread, he wanted to try something new. The fruit looked like an orange, but the color was closer to that of grapes. Kale put the fruit in his mouth and took a bite. In that instant, sweet fruit juice filled his mouth. He really hated sour fruits, so this extremely sweet flavor in his mouth made him subconsciously start to drool. At that moment, he made eye contact with his father Ruth, who was looking at him. Kale. Ruth quietly called Kale's name before hesitating. He then started to frown and move his mouth. Kale did not like that awkward atmosphere and started to speak. It's delicious. Yes, it tastes like trash, huh? Did you say it is delicious? Yes. Everything tastes wonderful. Kale picked up a different fruit this time and smiled after tasting the sweetness in his mouth once again. The trash, Kale Henitas, never cared for etiquette anyways. He probably shouldn't do this while speaking with his father, the head of the household, but whatever. He's just trash in the first place. It really is best to be the trash. Nobody really cared no matter what he did. As long as he can prevent himself from getting beaten up by the main character, it will be a good life. As Kale expected, nobody criticized his lack of manners. In fact, Ruth actually had a smile on his face as he started to nod his head. Yes, it really is delicious. It is nice to see you enjoying food so much. Ruth really seemed like the only person who cared for Kale. He didn't even seem to care about Kale's lack of manners. Well, a truly caring father should probably try to fix this personality of Kale, but this Kale did not care as he was not the real Kale Hennidus. Yes. Please make sure you eat a lot as well, father. Basin let out another, ho, and Kale, who heard it this time, turned his gaze back to the dishes. The 15-year-old Basin. The 3 years younger brother of the Kale that he possessed was difficult to handle. Unlike the trash Kale, Basin was smart, sincere, and very responsible. The people of the family were pushing for Basin to be the next head of household. Kim Rock-soo agreed with this sentiment even after turning into Kale. Rather than having a complicated life being in charge of this territory, I'd rather use my position as the Count's older brother to laze around and live peacefully in a section of the territory. Kale did not try to argue with Basin. He could hear Basin's gasp of shock and knew that Basin was looking down on him, but what could he do about it? Once Basin becomes the head of the household, his personality was one that he would probably not kill Kale, but in order to not get hurt and quietly move to a small village, he needed to not get on Basin's nerves. If that's not possible, I'll just make some money beforehand and go somewhere that the war will not reach. Kale pretended not to hear Basin's gasp and continued to eat. Once the meal was over, his father, Ruth, was the first to get up. He seemed to have been satisfied with breakfast, as his face was filled with a smile. It really was delicious. If breakfast was like this every day, Kale would probably give up some sleep to come eat breakfast all the time. Ruth looked around at the family members who got up after he did, before resting his gaze on his firstborn son, Kale. Kale, is there anything you need? Kale was confused at Ruth's sudden gesture, but he decided to honestly answer. Please give me some money. Sure, I'll give you a lot. Ruth answered without any hesitation. This really was a well-off family. As a territory that mined for marble and grew grapes for wine, they were overflowing with money right now. Great. Please give me as much as you can. Kale could feel his 2 younger siblings looking at him, but there was no need for him to be embarrassed. Wasn't it better to ask for money instead of drinking and causing a ruckus? Furthermore, he needed money to proceed with his plans. That fateful encounter, to get himself a strong enough power to keep himself safe. He needed some money in order to cause that fateful encounter to happen. Sure. I'll give you as much as I can. Kale started to smile after being satisfied with his father's response. However, he was at a loss of words after returning to his chamber and receiving the check from the deputy butler, Hans. The check that was issued through a partnership with the Treasury Department and the Magic Department made Kale's heart run wild. So much money? This family didn't seem to only have a bit of money. In fact, they seemed to have a lot of money. The novel did mention that Kale received a large allowance, but it did not mention the exact amount. However, he could realistically understand how large it was based on the amount listed on the check. 10 million gallon. It is about equivalent to 10 million Korean won. If it is like this, Kale could change his plans. Kale's brain started to quickly think about his options. I'll be heading out now, young master. The deputy butler delivered the check and bid goodbye, but Kale did not respond. Deputy butler Hans just treated this as normal and headed toward the door. However, he soon stopped moving. It was because Kale had gotten up from his seat and said something to Ron. Ron, let's go to the study. Hans then became anxious at Kale's words. Ron was the same. Did you say the study? Kale found this odd. This sly old man's voice was shaking a bit. Was there a reason he could not go to the study? Yes. He needed to go to the study to form his plan. There were no desks or even any paper in his chamber. There were a lot of expensive-looking alcohol bottles though. "Excuse me, young master. What is it?" Cale looked toward the anxious-looking deputy butler. We have not been able to do our morning cleaning of the study just yet." "Is that so?" "It's fine if it goes a day without cleaning." "No sir, we cannot let that happen." The deputy butler was extremely pushy about this for some reason. He then smiled brightly and put up a single finger. "Please just wait 1 hour. I will put my name on the line to make sure that the study is completely clean, not like a study that has not been used in 10 years, but one that was used just yesterday." "Sure, whatever." He didn't mind waiting an hour. "Great. Then I will go report this to the master." "No need to do that, but go ahead if you want to do so." "Yes, young master. I will be off now." "Okay." "Sure." Like a well-trained deputy butler, Hans closed the door without making any noise and disappeared. He seemed to be in a rush. Cale knew that there were 3 deputy butlers vying to become the official butler. Maybe that was why Hans was so passionate about it. "Ron." "Young master? Why are you blanking out like that?" "My apologies, young master." "No need to apologize." Ron had another odd expression on his face, but Cale put the precious check in his inner pocket as he asked. There was so much going on that he did not even have any time to ask about today's date. "What is today's date?" This question would seem odd coming from anybody else, but the servant Ron answered in a gentle voice. "It is the 29th day of the 3rd month in the 781st year of the Felix calendar." That is a problem." "Excuse me?" "Nothing." Cale tightly clenched on the 10 million gallon in his pocket once more. The only thing he could trust was money. Yesterday, the 28th day of the 3rd month in the 781st year of the Felix calendar. That was the day that the villagers of Harris Village, the village that the main character Choi Han went to after escaping from the Forest of Darkness, the place that Choi Han felt human affection for the first time in this world, made friends, and created a second family, were all murdered by an unknown group of assassins. Even Cale, who had read until the 5th volume, did not know the true identity of this secret organization that murdered the villagers. Some readers may be saying something like this while reading about this situation. "I thought he was really strong. What was Choi Han doing while they were murdered?" It is only natural to think like that. However, there is a reason this novel is called The Birth of a Hero, and not The Strength of the Hero, or The War of the Heroes. Birth. It was the story of a person who overcame all sorts of obstacles and carried the pains of his past as he became a hero. Love and friendship comes up along the way as he meets enemies and friends. Something that cannot be missing from a story is the awakening. He may have explosive talents and have lived for tens of years in the Forest of Darkness, but, through all of that, Choi Han was still an innocent and gentle person who could not kill another human being. He had no issues killing monsters, but Choi Han had never hurt another person. In order to turn someone like him into a hero, the novel had created a situation for Choi Han. In order to heal the lady who treated him like her own son, Choi Han had gone into the Forest of Darkness to find some precious medicinal herbs.